Afternoon. I'm Matt Gibson. I serve as District 1 representative on the State Young Farmer Committee. I am a young farmer from Kalamazoo County, Michigan. And today I am here to have a discussion about succession planning with Corey Clark from MSU Extension. Corey, would you mind giving us a little bio about yourself?
Sure. So I am the farm business management educator for Southeast Michigan. I cover up from Gratiot County all the way down through Monroe County. And I'm from a 400 cow dairy in Ingham County and work a lot with farms in succession planning and financial planning and an assortment of farm business management issues, but have a soft spot for succession planning.
Yeah, I think it's a great topic. I'm looking forward to having this conversation. Corey, so here's kind of our topic, the discussion meet topic. It says there are numerous resources available to support seamless farm and ranch succession planning. Planning. How can Farm Bureau help increase understanding, access, and utilization of tools and resources that help facilitate the smooth transition of land and capital from one generation to the next? And for me, I feel that is true and can be false a little bit at the same time, Corey. I just for me, I think a big thing from a young farmer's perspective is, there's a lot of topics and different tools to use, but like, how is it something that young farmers can start the topic or have that conversation?
Well, succession planning is a huge topic, and people find it very overwhelming from both the senior generation perspective and the junior generation perspective. I think one thing that's important is to get kind of an understanding of like a framework for succession planning, so you kind of understand some of the things involved. Um, and a lot of resources are out there to do that, webinars, conferences, those sorts of things to kind of get a sense of succession planning. But then, of course, then you have to work with succession planning with your own farm, and starting that conversation is hard. Um, some people have started that conversation in big ways, like starting to have the conversation. Like, I would really like to talk about how we can move this farm forward. I'd like to be more involved. Sometimes it helps, to allude to the senior generation wanting to back off. Sometimes that's not what they want to hear. But in other situations, young farmers get involved, they get more involved with the business. They get more involved with the financial side of the business, for example, in attending some meetings or getting involved in things like the marketing or some of the management areas that can lead to a bigger discussion later.
No, I completely agree. I feel it is a huge topic, and there is a lot of good tools out there. For me personally, I feel that there is a lack in that startup support and startup support and for the young farmers through all organizations, and how to get that topic started, and then also why it is important to get that topic started. Because for me, when I started my working on a succession plan, I had to be pretty blunt, and it was either a
Mhm.
make or a break. And that doesn't always work for everybody in every situation. But like, for me, I had some tools with friends that have kind of been through it, so I had people to talk to, but not all of them resources are available. And for me, is there any other ideas or maybe support that we could provide to young farmer members?
Um, there is a wide range of resources that can be available, and there's an even wider range of resources that should and need to be available. Some of the resources that are available, there's an extensive range of resources that are available. Tools for organizing information, workbooks that kind of prompt some conversations. Almost every university extension website has articles on various aspects of succession planning, from like the bigger picture down to some of the more technical aspects of planning, like equipment and land sort of transfer. What I don't think we see as much is the resources available to help with communication. Um, the the workbooks do help. The Wisconsin workbook, for example, has a lot of discussion prompts and ways that conversations can happen and kind of organizing some of that stuff. Um, but I feel like one of the things that's missing that I think would be really, really helpful is some peer support, type more organized. How do we get senior generation people to talk, but how do we get younger generation people to share experiences and share just kind of sometimes just to be able to talk about it because it's a difficult process. I think that's one area that is would be really helpful for young farmers to have. There certainly are consultants that help families go through the process. There's succession planning coordinators who kind of help at a process level, and then there's consultants and that help at a more technical level, and then lawyers tend to get very technical, of course, and about documents. Um, I think the amount of one-to-one support is available is less than the demand because succession planning is a big topic and a big issue that many, many people are dealing with. And I think that being able to provide support in addition to being able to get one-to-one consultation is really important.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel kind of from my experience talking to lots of young farmers across the state, it is very hard for them sometimes to handle whether it's being pushed, the topic being pushed aside or rejection on the topic, because it seems like there's a very big barrier between the young farmer and then the generation that's ready to slow down. And the one-on-one support I think could be really big for both. I mean, the younger generation's more the encouragement side, I feel, but the older generation just the one-on-one support just to listen. I mean,
Mhm,
that was one thing that really helped in, my experience in working on succession planning was when I worked with Roger
mhm,
Betts was you had someone with the older generation with the hey, I know how it is and can really help relate to that older generation farmer that's ready to go and can look at them and say, well, this is why it's important to do it.
mhm.
And I mean, that helps tremendous, I feel, in the long run of working on a plan. And we're in year 3 and we're still working on our long-term plan. So that's one thing I feel is another thing people don't realize is it doesn't happen overnight. It's a long-term game, and you if you're going to do it right, I feel.
Absolutely. And you're right that both the junior generation and the senior generation need some support. The senior generation a lot of times has to work through a lot of how they feel about backing off. It's really hard, of course, as you know, for older farmers to consider that maybe they want to and need to take a step back. And so the one-to-one support is helpful because we can listen to the older generation, kind of sort through what they need and help them to make decisions about what they want. And that's where I think some of the like group support could also be helpful because I think understanding that they're not alone from a senior generation standpoint and understanding that you're not alone from a junior generation standpoint is super important. And also because, like you said, it is a long process. You start in the like thinking about it stage, you start in the like starting the discussion stage, and then there's the discussion part, and then there's the technical part, and then there's the development part where you have all the tools, and then there's the implementation part. And that, of course, goes on for a potentially long time. So everybody has to be interested and committed to the process and willing to work through a lot of stuff, both technical and family and communication.
No, yeah, I completely agree. I feel other than getting the conversation started, one of the hardest things with the succession planning is being able to transition that the senior generation out, whether it's tax liabilities, equipment, land, everything. A big thing young farmers are running into nowadays is everything costs so much money.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have to start borrowing a lot of money to buy that operation out, or have the capital to farm more, the interest rates with the amount of money it costs to do it is also a very tough topic. So with that, is there anything you think of, that could be a benefit for either helping convert that tax liability over to a farm or the transitional land? Like for me, I've personally bought a farm on a land contract to start out with, and that helped me get going. And then in the way we're working towards now with our takeover with this new farm is we kind of have an agreement of we're going to pay X amount of dollars a year over so many years. And then from there, we're going to go on.
It is certainly a big issue to sort out, both the family issues and the technical issues, including taxes and financial transitions. I think one of the things that's really important in like having your professional, whoever it is, consultant, lawyer, whoever, develop a technical plan for the transfer, meaning all of the documents and how this transition is going to happen, how the land transition is going to happen, how the equipment transition is going to happen, is knowing what your objectives and goals are together. So the senior generation, of course, has to communicate those because they are the owners of the land and equipment, but they need it like in concert with the younger generation. And once they can communicate what they want, what you want in a big picture and in small picture, um, then that's what your professionals are for. There's a lot of ways to minimize taxes. There's a lot of ways to facilitate the senior generation getting the financial support that they need from revenues like land rent and equipment purchases and things like that, when land purchases. Um, so the senior generation gets the financial support they need, as well as minimizing taxes and taking full advantage of all the opportunities that are financially and legally available. But it starts with those goals and being able to articulate what it is that we want together, because the tools that are available to do it, there's choices for the land, there's choices for all the different types of assets in terms of tools, ways to buy, sell, gifting might be involved for the different types of assets, and you can handle land different than equipment, different than inventory. um, and then separately from the assets, related but also separate, is the business structure itself, and how do you handle like who owns the business and the revenues and expenses structure, and how does that play into the assets. So I think that from a technical standpoint, the assets can be looked at together and the business structure can be looked at as a separate but related issue. But again, I'll probably say this a million times. It goes back to what is it that everybody wants? And can you
Yeah.
articulate that together? And that honestly, that is the hardest part. The technical stuff, the consultants can sort out. The hardest part is the communication.
Oh, I completely agree. So with that, kind of going back to some of the stuff with this discussion meat question. So like
Sure.
from Farm Bureau standpoint, like for using the tools and how to help like get that available to its members. For me, I think of, the Young Farmer Conference that we host
Mhm.
at the state level. Like what in your mind might be some key things to focus on while having that event if we wanted to do maybe a couple sessions on succession planning?
Well, I think you guys have two opportunities conferences wise. There's the succession planning conferences that are held periodically, and the Young Farmer Conference each year. And I think one of the things that would be helpful is just to understand all the resources out there. You can do like a Google search and you'll get a zillion sites and resources, and then you can dig through them and figure out what's there. But knowing what's out there and being able to find it, which workbooks are they, which ones would be helpful for me. The Purdue one is all fact sheets about, that are guides and information about the different processes, really helpful. Also different from the Wisconsin workbook, which sets up conversations. There's actually two that set up conversations amongst the family, and then there's a wealth of articles and fact sheets and webinars that are useful in the succession planning process. And I feel like knowing what they are would be helpful. And then being able to, the other thing, kind of like I was saying, is being able for young farmers to talk about their experiences, potentially like, formally in a panel setting, but also informally in a how is this going for all of us, and what are our experiences, and um what might we do about it?
I really like that idea of the panel, or that would be a good idea because I feel for me as a young farmer, I learn more from listening to other young farmers talk about things
Mhm.
they've been through or they're going through or have done sometimes than just listening to somebody speak about, here's a flyer, you can find this there or this
Mhm.
at this location. So that is a very good point, and that is a very good suggestion of what Farm Bureau can do is get young farmers or any farmers that have done it in front of them so that they can talk about it.
And I think there's an opportunity to both hear from senior farmers and what their experience is, and then also the younger farmers that have gone through it. But I think that both perspectives are really important, because it's hard to understand the kind of like emotional gymnastics that the senior generation is going through in order to process the succession planning, and the resources for communication and um, sorting out the personal side of the people side of the succession planning. That's just not nearly as available, and I feel like Farm Bureau could have a real part in providing that, the experiences you were talking about, like what is it like, how have people experienced it, and maybe how they might proceed.
Yeah, I completely agree because it kind of brings me to a point where it's funny because one guy who I'm working with in a succession planning, the senior generation, he always laughed and said, well, I'm going to leave it up to you to figure out how to do this because if I have to figure out how to do it, it's never going to work. And, it's to his point is, yeah, there's someone out there, there's a tool to do it, but until we can sit down and agree what works for both of us and we both can agree on it, that's the only way. And where can we get that one-on-one support, and where can or where can we keep learning from one another? And I feel that's a big thing, and it's a hard thing for some people, is just to ask for help,
Mhm.
because they might not, whether they don't want to tell people what they have going on or they just don't know how, is a huge problem with the succession planning part of it, is from both the senior and the junior generation, just being able to have an open conversation as we kind of are today. For a lot of family farms, I think it's a very tough spot.
I think that one-on-one support is so important, and it can be really hard to find. Um, but having a person that can hear both generations, work with the individuals, but also facilitate the conversations and move the process forward, so that in part, so that the younger generation isn't in the position of like, this is what I think you should do with your assets, but rather having kind of the joint conversation and the decision making be able to happen. And I think um, to the extent that Farm Bureau can facilitate those connections with people that can provide one-on-one consultation, um, networking with those consultants and the lawyers that are able to provide those services, that one-on-one support is so valuable.
Yes, I completely agree. And then like through from my experience working with MSU Extension was a big help as well,
Mhm.
because there's a lot of resources that I don't think people realize, that your guys' phone number is right on the internet and you can
Mhm.
be reached, and you guys really will talk about anything depending on what area you focus on, which is a
Mhm.
huge thing for farmers and young farmers all over the place if they're willing to look at that support.
Yeah, our team, there's 5 of us around the state that are farm business management educators. And across the 5 of us, we cover a huge range of farm business management topics. And each of us has kind of some areas that we spend more time in. And there's a couple of us that spend a lot of time in succession planning, and multiple educators that are willing to provide some individual guidance on how to proceed with succession planning. Some of us are involved with guiding families through the process, but a lot of times it's a, one consultation, like, hey, this is where I'm at. What do you think? Um, how do you think we could approach this? And then like we help them kind of get over that barrier, and then the conversation and the process flows. They go to their lawyer and things go better. So one of the nice things about MSU Extension is we provide kind of very flexible resources in addition to having a wide variety of them.
Yeah, which is really important, like you said, to be able to have that wide variety. You guys can look at all aspects, whereas I feel a lot of resources out there might only be one step. You can do
Mhm.
this and then you need to work with this person, because it's kind of like whenever you set something up, first you got to see this lawyer, then you got to see this
Mhm.
person, then you got to meet with this person's tax person. And one thing I learned with working with your guys's organization is you guys can help point everybody in the right direction, and and I really thank you guys for being there to do that, for my scenario.
Yeah, we try. That's one of the things we feel like is really, really important, is getting everybody pointed in the same direction with a kind of unified perspective that they can articulate. Because there really is a lot of technical support in terms of lawyers. A lot of times getting the lawyers and the lawyer and the financial professional and the tax professional all in one place can be a tool for developing a plan right off, and then you go and carry it out. But yeah, having that support to get all pointed in the same direction is a really valuable tool.
Yep. So to then kind of jump back a little bit, kind of jumped around, which this topic is something we could talk about forever.
Hmm.
I guess, you know, I've heard quite a few people talk about, they finally have the courage to have this conversation, but it doesn't seem like it's going their way, or not going their way, but just isn't working out. So like they either don't know what to do and they feel like they're at a standstill, or they move on.
Hmm.
And they're leaving the farm. So now I guess for me that's a struggle, is we're losing more young farmers in a tight industry where we're losing farmers every year and our number keeps going down and doesn't grow. Um Obviously we've talked about support, the one-on-one support, but is there any like out of the out of the box thinking that you have that maybe we could try to implicate, to have another support or teaching on how to handle that if it just doesn't go well in that scenario, or just kind of a little different subject on what we're talking about?
Well, I think there are professionals in a variety of areas that can be supportive and provide information in this area. For example, we have a farm stress program that provides some one-on-one like teletherapy for individuals trying to process, like go through this process. Um, so that's kind of a different angle from the one-on-one support of going through the process, that because that farm stress support can help even if the process isn't going well or isn't going at all, actually. I think there's also room for um, you pointing in a different direction the professionals that are involved in conferences and resources and whatever. There are like people that are counselors and involved in like the social work field and Other fields that can be provide guidance and information in, um, where do you go when the communication isn't going well, but maybe there's still potential for it? Or how do you handle when the communication isn't going well and there really isn't potential for it? And how do you sort out the difference between those two? I think there are other fields that could be drawn into the farm succession conversation that could lend some insight into these areas that aren't really covered yet.
No, I completely agree because I feel everybody's got a different story, everybody's got a different scenario. I mean, I really didn't know personally when I was working on some of my own stuff how to even start the conversation. And when I did
Mhm.
start the conversation, I opened up a can of worms and it was almost comical. But everything works out sometimes. But it is hard, and no one likes to be rejected or no one wants to feel like they have no future. And I think that's a big thing with this topic is on the younger generation side is the importance of having the conversation is because they're trying to figure out their future, what their next steps are going to be, and how they continue on with whether it's taking over the farm or they're just being able to have some management say instead of being an employee. And with that, those we've talked about a lot of different things that'll help, but there is a lot of things that are lacking for that support. And as we continue to push this topic across the states and the country, there is a lot of open holes that I feel we need to find a way to fill those holes. And there's been a lot of good things we've talked about from the one-on-one standpoint, but I guess one thing I'm trying to figure out is how do we approach just the overall, hey, we need to have this conversation.
That is definitely a hard one. Um, I think there are, I think it helps to have the process started before the big conversation happens. So making an attempt to get involved in some of the further management things, asking to attend, meetings with professionals, and um the little conversations kind of soften the ground for a bigger conversation. And at some point you do have to say something along the lines of, hey, I'd like to talk about this. I'd like to get more involved. I know maybe that's something, I'm hoping that's something you saw for the future. Can we have that conversation? Um, but given that it's a big process, getting some of those little things started first you can start to see whether it's working without full scale rejection. You can start to lay down the framework and the groundwork for a bigger conversation. Um, it gives you information and starts the process at the same time.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a long process and it's a very hard one to start and it's very uncomfortable for a lot of people to have that conversation, but
Mhm.
it's encouraging that some of the things we've talked about today and some things that we've also covered of holes and things we need to look at doing. um there's a future. We just need to figure out how to present that future and to help push that younger generation and that senior generation in listening and thinking outside the box, or even just getting the process started so that they can continue these family farms and keep moving in the right direction so we can try to keep as many of these family farms going, or just farms in general going
Mhm.
across the country.
Absolutely. And it involves so many people to try to get the succession process going and have these farms succeed across generations requires everyone. It requires the younger generation to be involved, the senior generation to be involved, and sometimes there's multiple generations to be involved. I know you were involved in a multi-generational succession plan. The number of people involved to get pointed in the same direction so that we can continue to preserve our family farms is a lot.
Yes, I completely agree. With that, I think really we've covered all the questions I kind of had prepared. Is there any other thing you would want to talk about or think we should talk about?
For as big of a topic as succession planning is, I think we've covered a lot of ground. I think it leaves open a lot of room for people to still have to like look at what's out there and figure out what helps and get the personnel, the people involved that you need. But we've tackled a wide variety of things, and I hope that it's helpful.
Yes, thank you. Thanks again, Corey, for taking time out of your day to have this conversation about succession planning with me. And I will be sure to pass your guys' information along as much as I can on this topic so that way we can keep things moving in the right direction.
That sounds great.
Thank you.